Well, the WNBA regular season is off and running, which means summer school is in session at college campuses all across the country. We've got graduations moving in and moving on, along with what is going on right now with the NCAA. We go back to campus today here on Locked On Women's Basketball.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, happy Monday, friends. It is May 20th, 2024. Happy graduation to all of the graduates out there and the family members of each and every one. Whether it's preschool to doctorate degrees, congrats and cheers to all of you. And cheers and hats off to the good people of my home state of Minnesota, where I was born and raised. The Timberwolves are moving on in the NBA playoffs. They did it last night. Hi, everybody. I am Missy Heidrick, national correspondent at The Next. And thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Well, you can find me at Missy Heidrick, and then be sure to follow this podcast at Locked On WBB on Twitter, X, formerly known as Twitter. But then you've got to come over and see all of my amazing colleagues at thenexthoops.com for complete coverage is everything women's hoops, from college to international, and especially outstanding WNBA coverage. We have everything for you. Well, while so much of the sports world right now is focused on pro sports, it might be the NBA playoffs, Stanley Cup playoffs, the WNBA regular season is off and running, as we said, outstanding, and some crazy storylines in professional golf. This is also the time of year when you think that college campuses might be pretty darn quiet. Finals are over for most, graduations are in the books. You've got U-Hauls moving people in and out of dorms, sorority houses, apartments, and college basketball coaches are gearing up for their summers. That's going to include their workouts and team practices, recruiting, camps, more recruiting. And then, of course, it's the all-nighters that they are each having pouring over at the transfer portal on a daily basis. But the NCAA has also been in the news as of late, and so is some conference realignment trickle-down stories. So today I want to dive in a little bit and talk about what some of those things are and what's new on those fronts, and then where this coaching carousel and the transfer portal have taken us in women's college basketball over the last month or so, as of today, because it can always change. But I want to first start with some news that has trickled down over the last couple weeks as it relates to some of the conference realignment things we've talked about way back when the ball was first dropped in our lap about Oklahoma and Texas making their way to the SEC. Well, that is official come July 1. No longer part of the Big 12. They will be SEC members. If you haven't seen it, they've already put out a new SEC commercial that includes Oklahoma and Texas in it. But then there are the other things. We've seen other people join the Big 12, and then it was also the trickle down as teams like USC and UCLA decided they were going to the Big 10. That changed everything, and then the Pac-12 has gone away as well. Well, I want to first start with UCLA and Cal. Now, two teams have been part of the Pac-12 since almost its inception out on the West Coast. UCLA moving to the Big 10 when the Pac-12 was looking as though it was going to disintegrate. What was going to happen to Cal? What was going to happen to Stanford? Well, they land in the ACC. However, there was an interesting conversation and really part of what was going to happen with the University of California, Berkeley, and the setup that they have within the government and the regents scenario in California that governs both UCLA and Cal. But ultimately, what has come down and has been reported over the last couple of weeks is that UCLA is going to pay Cal Berkeley $10 million a year for 3 years instead of 6 years as a result of their upcoming move to the Big 10 and the implosion of the Pac-12. The University of California Board of Regents, they had a special committee on athletics. They voted 7-1 just a couple of weeks ago in a meeting that they would cut down the lengths of those payments. that the UC president, Michael Drake, recommended 6 years in a report going into that meeting. It was moved to 3. In order for the regents to affirm UCLA's move to the Big Ten back in December of 2022, the university had agreed to pay UC Berkeley between $2 and $10 million because of how the move would affect the Cal athletic programs. They agreed to join the ACC after last year, as we said, when the Pac-12 imploded. But because of increased travel costs, Cal will have a reduced share of the ACC media rights. Therefore, they are not getting whole shares upon this move. That is why there had been the agreement for UCLA to pay dollars to Cal over a course of time. According to the report by the UC's president, as it was reported on ESPN.com, the difference between UCLA's annual media right distribution from the Big Ten and UC Berkeley's share from the ACC will be approximately $50 million a year. That is a massive gap. Will be made up by some with the payments that will come. But in order for this to happen, in order for UCLA to make that move to the Big Ten, this had to be agreed upon. And as I said at the very beginning, that UCLA could pay the University of California, Berkeley $10 million a year for 3 years instead of 6 as a result of the Bruins' upcoming move to the Big Ten and the demise. One of those trickle-down effects. A lot of things will happen. What will be the result? Still to be determined as we see these teams move to new leagues. In the West Coast Conference, there has been some moves and a couple shakeups there. In 25-26 school year, they will be adding Grand Canyon University and Seattle U. Both of them will be, now they will have 11 full members as they will be joining as full members of the WCC Conference. This has always really been kind of known as a basketball conference, but very heavy in other sports and commitments. Just remember, there were 2 WCC women's basketball teams in the NCAA tournament this past year in both Gonzaga and Portland. This is a heavy California geography-based league, but now they will be giving Grand Canyon, which is in Arizona, and Seattle up in the state of Washington, really expanding their reach, 11 full members in 25-26. Also in 25-26, they will have 13 schools competing through 25-26 in basketball with Oregon State and Washington, because Washington State, those 2 schools with an agreement with the WCC so that they have a place for those teams to land in competition. And as we talk later a little bit about the transfer portal and what has happened there, those teams are going to look very different. Also news out of Conference USA, Missouri State will be moving in 2025 as a full member and leaving the Missouri Valley. This was a football moves to FBS from FCS, those classifications, the third school to join Conference USA over the next 2 seasons in making that move in football. That is the trickle-down effect. We also mentioned the UCLA and Cal and how that all really kind of came to be. Well, let's all just think about the fact that when the Pac-12 baseball tournament concludes at the end of this week, it begins May 21st tomorrow, Tuesday the 21st, and it runs through May 25th. This is the last competitive conference-sponsored championship in the Pac-12. Ultimately, the lights will absolutely now be turned out in the Pac-12 as we have known it for decade upon decade. What happens and moves forward will be up to Oregon State and Washington State and how they proceed with their ability to do that. But as we know it, at the conclusion of the baseball tournament on May 25th, the Pac-12 as we know it will be no longer. I also want to bring attention to a fantastic article if you have not seen it, because I really do feel like this gives us a clear picture of what's been going on with the NCAA over the course of the past few weeks, really months and even years. This goes back way beyond and way before NIL and what that meant. It actually goes all the way back into 2013 when a lawsuit was filed to the NCAA as it related to the use and image likeness of college student athletes in the EA Sports college football video game. That's where it really kind of all started to be planted. But hats off to Ken Segura of the Atlantic Journal-Constitution. His article through syndication, I found it here over the course of the last day or so. It's fantastic because it absolutely, and quote, the title of it is, Seismic Changes Are Coming to College Athletics. It is a fantastic read and a great way to really understand what lies ahead. One of the biggest things is we know that over the next week or so, maybe 2 to 3, there will be seismic change and big differences around college athletics. And we're going to talk about that when we come back in just a moment, as well as some of the changes we've seen in women's college basketball and coaches, and maybe how they're feeling the crunch of some of these decisions that have been part of what the NCAA is doing as well. But wouldn't it be great if you could see all of your investment and retirement accounts in one place? Well, with Yahoo Finance, you can consolidate your views for multiple accounts into one hub and access the expert analysis you need to tend to your entire portfolio with confidence. When it comes to your financial future, you think you're doing it all. You're saving, you're researching, you're investing all that you can. But now you need to take those investments to the next level by using what every financial great uses, Yahoo Finance. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or are looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data you need in one place. They are the #1 financial destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, and so much more. For a comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com. The #1 financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. Well, today's episode is also brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. It is the easiest and most exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats and watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the playoff action and win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks as the world's best players take the game to the new level and the next level during the basketball postseason. It has something for every sports fan and is the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. Testing my skills on Prize Picks this basketball season is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $1,000 with just a few taps. And it is really simple to play. You can make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds, excuse me. So download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. That's downloading the app and using the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Well, hi, everybody. Missy Heidrick. Welcome back to Locked On Women's Basketball today. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your television all day? Do you have to turn down the volume with all the shouting? Well, make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, as we were talking about changes that have been that trickle-down effect, we've said it has happened on more than one occasion with different leagues, whether it's been teams moving to the Big Ten, and then that was a slew of people going to the ACC, and then we saw teams coming to the Big 12 as some left and made the decision many years ago to head to the SEC. But it's also been those smaller leagues as the West Coast and the Missouri Valley, Conference USA. It has happened all over the country. But there's also those pieces of the puzzle that sit at the NCAA level and what happens with the membership and what's going to go moving forward. As I mentioned just a moment ago, hats off to a fantastic article, which I think is a great explanation. You can find it in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. It is called Seismic Changes Are Coming to College Athletics by Ken Segura. And he did a great job of really outlining what are the things that everyone has to keep an eye on over the course of the next few months. Well, the catalyst has always been the lawsuits that the NCAA and the power conferences, we've always said Power 5, ladies and gentlemen, but let's remember, as of the end of this week, we go to Power 4. And the power conferences, they are expected to settle with the NCAA owing about $2.8 billion in damages, according to the reports from Yahoo Sports' Ross Dellinger. The NCAA and conference leaders likely will agree to the terms because they do not want to go to trial, where they could be looking at damages up to $20 billion. But this settlement is also going to be stipulated as how athletes at the power conference schools can be paid directly by the schools themselves. Ultimately, we have gone and we are dipping in the toe from where we've always said college sports has been amateur. We are headed into truly that professional stature. They will get paid. Power conference schools will be able to annually earmark somewhere in the vicinity of $21 million to directly compensate athletes, likely starting sometime maybe in the fall of 2025. Traditionally, can't do that. You can't pay student athletes. We've talked about name, image, and likeness and the muddy waters of collectives and what that looks like. But this is very different. And as ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips told the media during their conference spring meetings down in Florida about a week or so ago, he said, and I quote, "This is the seismic shift in college athletics. It's not a matter of if, it's going to happen. It's happening now," end quote. So maybe this is progress, and some people might say that we're getting to the end, that this has been where we've gone for people want to talk about coaches' salaries. They want to talk about media rights and driving those dollars up and all of those things. But as I mentioned earlier, some of this is the trickle down from 2013, which was ultimately the settlement that related to the first usage and people taking ownership of name, image, and likeness when EA Sports put out the college football video game. Well, you fast forward now to 2024, there's going to be a new college football game that's being released, and they did it in under the umbrella of NIL, understanding that then they could offer college football players a chance to be part of it. So FBS football players were offered $600 and a copy of the game. I'm sure there are a few that got much bigger deals because they are at the cream of their crop within the college game. But for the use of their name, image, and likeness, and more than 11,000 and up to 100 from over 130 FBS teams signed up. They wanted to be part of this video game. They got $600, if not more, plus a copy of the game to be a part of it. Well, there's really the other side of all of this. And I think we know that if we're going to start talking about paying student athletes and earmarking dollars that are going to go to that, it's going to be very difficult for some to be able to survive. If you're in the SEC and you're one of the big dogs, or whether it's Georgia or Alabama, or you are Michigan in the Big Ten, or you might be UCLA, USC making those moves, they're going to have some of those resources. But as we think about teams in the West Coast Conference or the Missouri Valley or the Ohio Valley, the Summit League, maybe even the Big East, as they look at how their lives will change and how the scope of their institutions and their athletic programs will change, can they survive? Well, part of this settlement, which is also coming, according to Yahoo Sports, is that the NCAA will offer $1 to $2 million less per school in annual distributions for the next 10 years as part of the damages owed to athletes for use of their name, image, and likeness before the NCAA made NIL payments legal back in 2021. So now we have the NCAA, which has doled out dollars and revenue distribution to institutions all over the country, but now that's going to be less. And how do you make that change? How does a small program, a small athletic department in a mid-major conference survive maybe without those dollars? That can be a very big hit to your budget. The other thing that is happening at the NCAA level that everyone needs to keep an eye on, that's part of this settlement and part of where we've gone with paying student athletes and directly from the institutions, is that they are going to look at removing, and more than likely, the NCAA scholarship limits for each sport. For instance, Division I baseball is a great example of this. We look at it and say right now, if you are a Division I baseball program, you have 11.7 scholarships available to you, of which you take those dollars and you divvy it up to the players on your team. Well, no longer are we going to talk about scholarship limits. The NCAA will put in roster numbers. You can have 30 or less on a baseball roster, and you can pay them whatever you want. If you have the resources to give 30 full scholarships to 30 baseball players, you can do that. If you have the resources to give all 30 players at least 75% of a full scholarship at your institution, you can do that. But again, this is only going to be for those programs and those athletic departments and spaces of which they have the resources. The trickle down effect, ladies and gentlemen, is that we are looking at big changes across college athletics, not only because of paying student athletes as soon as 2025, but these changes from scholarship limits to roster limits, and the ability then to be able to give as much money to anyone at any point in time if you meet and as you meet those roster limits. I think the thing everyone has to be aware of, and Ken Segura, again, in his article with the Atlantic Journal-Constitution, made this point, and I think it absolutely is true, and it's the one thing we have to keep in mind, that these things are not necessarily going to affect at the Power Four, but it is everyone else. And you might not be able to make it in a non-revenue world. Will we see programs be cut? Will we see sports be cut? Will we see the landscape change? Absolutely. You start paying players and you start changing the face of how they go about with scholarships and no scholarship limits, but yet roster limits, things change quickly. This is one thing to keep your eye on, and a special thanks, as I said, Ken Segura, his great article, and it's a wonderful act, and it's a great commentary and a great explanation of what lies ahead in the world of college sports. All right, when we come back, we've got to bounce around the country a little bit. We've got to talk about where we are with some of these big coaching changes, as well as the transfer portal, women's college basketball on the forefront, as always. Well, first, a message from our friends at FanDuel. It is winner take all right now in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Minnesota at Dallas in the NBA playoffs. FanDuel says the T-Wolves are -4 in game one. I'll take that. Anthony Edwards all day. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, a message also from our friends at Magic Spoon, and we are so excited to have them be part of our Locked On Women's Basketball family. Growing up, cereal was one of the best parts of being a kid. But as I've gotten older, you've got to watch out for other things, sugar, empty carbs. Magic Spoon has amazing flavors that you will love, high protein and less sugar. Now there's a variety pack, 4 flavors, cocoa, fruity, frosted, and peanut butter. This pack has 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, 4 to 5 grams of net carbs, only 140 calories per serving. It's a high protein, 0 grams of sugar, keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, and soy-free. Huge favorite in my house is the cocoa and frosted. Empty boxes all around. So go to magicspoon.com/lockedon to grab a variety pack and try it today. And be sure to use our promo code LOCKEDON at checkout to save $5 off your order. And Magic Spoon is so confident in their product, it's backed by 100% happiness guarantee. So go, if you don't like it for any reason, they will refund your money, no questions asked. Remember, start your day off right with a delicious bowl of high protein cereal at magicspoon.com/lockedon and use the code LOCKEDON to save $5 off. Hi, everyone. Missy Heidrick, and thank you so much for joining us here today on Locked On Women's Basketball. It is Monday, May 20th. The sun is shining, hopefully, where you are. It is at my house. The Timberwolves are moving on in the NBA playoffs. The WNBA is off and running. Nelly Korda won yet another women's professional golf tournament. If we couldn't say that women's sports and all things are at the forefront, it is absolutely true. Oh, and the Olympics are coming this summer, so we get to see all sorts of fantastic performances on display. Well, as the college basketball season has wound down, as we crowned a national champion undefeated in South Carolina back in April, The transfer portal was spinning super, super fast, as well as the coaching carousel. We saw a lot of changes and have seen them over the course of the last month and a half. I did a couple weeks ago with Michelle Smith, had the pleasure to be able to visit with her just after Tara Vanderveer had announced her retirement at Stanford after 38 years. One of the things that's just been announced over the course of the last couple weeks is that they will be naming the court after Coach Vanderveer at Maples Pavilion, which is really a great way to continue her legacy there. The Kate Pay era has began, and they have been hitting the transfer portal, which is also an interesting angle that has come now as things move forward. At Tennessee, we saw the firing of Kelly Harper as the season ended there, the hiring of Kim Caldwell from Marshall. This will be a very big task, big shoes to fill, as we know, a historic women's basketball program. A lot of questions to be able to see. She has gone and found herself some very, I think, veteran and seasoned recruiters and people that are familiar with the SEC, which I think will help in that transition, as well as give some credibility out on the recruiting trail as they not only look to lock down players that may have already committed to Tennessee, to keep them within the fold, to think forward within the transfer portal, and then look ahead of what they need to do and what holes they might need to fill within their roster. That is a huge one. And then the news last week, which is really probably very bittersweet for everyone, not only in the Big Ten, but at the University of Iowa. Lisa Bluder, 63 years old. She is the winningest coach, not only in Iowa women's basketball history, but in the Big Ten. 24 years at Iowa in the era of Caitlin Clark. Over the past few, we have seen the Hawkeyes not only be part of the national conversation because of Caitlin Clark, but because of sustained success. And I think that's one thing that sometimes you get lost. We see in the headlights and we see in the highlights and the big fancy ones that are kind of shining and directed on maybe one player throughout a course of a career. But it's sustained success. A player like Caitlin Clark, who maybe tapped into her true potential as a collegiate basketball player, but she wasn't just some average Joe kid off the block in West Des Moines, Iowa. There was a reason why she wanted to go to the University of Iowa, because of that success, because of opportunity, because of what it would be like to play in some of the biggest stages and to compete for championships, not only Big Ten championships in the regular season and in a conference tournament, but also to put yourself on a national scale and to get to the NCAA tournament and maybe to the Final Four. And this Iowa team to NCAA national champion finals. They did not get over the hump. It beat South Carolina. They didn't beat LSU a year ago, but it has absolutely put Iowa women's basketball on the map. Iowa has promoted Jan Jensen, who has been an assistant for 24 years with Lisa Bluder there. She played at Drake. She is an Iowa native herself from Kimballton, Iowa. She led the nation as a player in scoring back in 1991, for those that didn't know that. But I think one of the things about Jan Jensen is she has been a fixture with Iowa women's basketball. No doubt about it. If you've been there for 24 years, a lot in the same methodology, and I think the same path as Kate Pay with Stanford, is that you are taking someone who understand the culture of the program, of the institutions, of the changes and the things that are happening, and that you have to really be on one single page. Everyone's got to be going the same direction. Sometimes change and too much can be overwhelming, and it might not be the right fit for that program. But I can tell you, it seems as though Jan Jensen is going to be stepping into big shoes, just as Kate Pay has at Stanford, but either way, two very, very successful assistant coaches who are taking on big challenges. Some new looks that are going to be in the ACC. Sean Poppy, Clemson fired Amanda Butler. Sean Poppy comes from Chattanooga. He will take over in a very new look ACC with Cal and Stanford and SMU joining that league. Kayla Karius, she exits South Dakota after 2 seasons to go back to her home, where she was an Horizon Player of the Year as a student athlete. She goes back to the University of Wisconsin Green Bay to take over that program as Kevin Borseth retires. I think that's a great hire. I think very highly of Kayla Karius. She's been on this podcast here on Locked On Women's Basketball with me, and that's a perfect fit to go home and go back to her roots. We've also seen some changes, obviously, at Kentucky. Kenny Brooks leaves Virginia Tech after Kyra was fired in Lexington. He takes over the Kentucky program, jumps from the ACC to the SEC. But then it's the trickle-down effect. As we always know, it's going to happen as the dominoes go in any kind of college search. Megan Duffy goes from Marquette then to Virginia Tech. And then we see Kara Consuegra. She is going to be the new coach in the Big East at Marquette as well. Those are some of the ones that really stood out for me. Also want to give props to Ashley Langford, a coach who has been at Stony Brook, but she now returns to her alma mater at Tulane. I think this is a great hire. I think she's going to be a person that can really help give that program some credibility and legitimacy in New Orleans. Obviously, not an easy job, but yet so much talent in that state and in the surrounding states. If you can tap into it, Tulane's a great institution. She has got something to sell there. We also know that there has been close to 1,200 or more players that have entered into the transfer portal, and it has been a wild ride over the last month and a half. It closed, but yet there's still some big names that have moved. We've seen the shakeups. We've seen how it has affected some programs. 7 players left Oregon State as they no longer are part of the Pac-12. They go to the WCC, but really hard to blame some of those young women who some might be in a grad transfer situation. They're looking to use those additional years, but also others just wanting to be able to play in that Power 5 league, to not be able to not have to. It's just not the same. And that's an understandable thing. And I think all of those players who have looked and gone into the portal have found good homes. Hats off to Lindsey Gottlieb in USC. They get Kiki Iriafen from Stanford, Talia von Olfen from Oregon State, 2 huge pickups in the portal. We saw Kenny Brooks get Georgia Amore to come and join him for her 5th year. She will be moving from Virginia Tech to Kentucky, a huge get for them. Layla Felia, Michigan to Texas. I think that's a big win right there for Vic Schaefer. I think she adds a lot to their front court and what they can do with her athleticism. UCLA, Tamia Gardner from Oregon State. She stays on the West Coast. And also Charlize Lager-Walker from Washington State. They lost her this year with an ACL injury. She'll be rehabbing, but joining that UCLA squad and staying on the West Coast with Corey Close, I think that is a really big pickup for them. Reagan Beers from Oregon State. She's going to go to Oklahoma and try her luck in the SEC with Jenny Baranchik. She will be a force for them inside, and I think that is a really great fit for her. We've also seen some moves, some 6 total transfers from North Carolina, a lot of different looks for that team in the ACC. One major one, Deja Kelly. She's going to go to Oregon, so she's going to move from the ACC to the Big Ten, because remember, the Oregon Ducks, along with Washington, UCLA, and USC, they are now new proud members of the Big Ten. Well, I want to thank everybody for listening and watching today. We've gone through a lot of stuff because I think it's sometimes we lose track of where we all are in this space as it relates to college basketball and the NCAA. And it affects women's basketball. It affects the student athletes, the coaches, the programs, and the fans, because you want to be able to lop on. You want to be able to cheer, and you want to be able to have that connection. It's not as easy anymore when our teams move different conferences and they go all over, and the players and the rosters don't look the same. The portal has changed that. So as fans of college basketball, I just really encourage you, don't lose faith. Don't lose hope. It will still be there. The game is fantastic. No matter what happens sometimes of the things that are out of their control, the players and coaches in these programs want to continue to put a quality product on the floor for you to watch, for you to see, to go buy your tickets and go cheer on your favorite collegiate basketball teams. Well, you can find me at Missy Heidrick on Twitter, formerly known as X. And then also, please go see all of my amazing college. You can visit us here at Locked On WBB, as well as go to the Next Hoops. We will get you taken care of with everything you need to know about women's basketball. It is the best place, 24/7, 365 days a year. Well, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Tire TV channel app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. So find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Thank you, everybody, for listening and watching. Have a fantastic Monday, a wonderful week. Come back and see us here all week for more news, information, breakdown, analysis, coaches, so much more. The WNBA is in high gear. We got you covered. and we will see you soon. Happy graduation to everybody out there, and happy spring. May is finally here.